Professor Srilakshmi Peddada as the next speaker in the conference. Professor Srilakshmi Peddada is an academician for 25 years. She is committed to the philosophy of continuous learning. She has a deep interest in facilitating and doing research that is interdisciplinary in nature. She has proven a track record. She has a proven track record in providing quality education with a particular focus on jurisprudence. Her experience is as academic researcher, lawyer practiced in Bombay High Court, adjunct faculty in Ravin Gandhi College of Law, presented papers at different forums including international forums, organized and coordinated guest lectures and workshops in legal education. She has a PhD, the language of rights, the imperative to the imperative, University of Mumbai. Her publications are the Practical Reasoning of Legislative Acts, World Congress of Philosophy 2016, Proceedings, The Philosophy of Aristotle, ICGBC, Volume 4, Athens 2018, page number 192 to 2003, and Practical Reasoning of Legislative Acts, Philosophical Traditions of the World, University of Mumbai Press, January 2019. The Freedom of Conscience, A Revolution in Tradition, Philosophical Traditions of the World, University of Mumbai Press, February 2020. Women of Achievement in Academia, Women in Law, May 2020. And may I share information of a personal note with, from the point of view of Indic Academy. The Pamadigantam Kodandaramaya Center for Indic Studies and in Law and Justice has the name of Justice Pamadigantam Kodandaramaya. Srilakshmi Peddada is the daughter of Pamadigantam Kodandaramaya, in whose name our Center for Indic Studies in Law and Justice is established. Over to you, Dr. Srilakshmi Peddada.
Namaskar to all the eminent scholars, distinguished panel, and many thanks to Indica for giving me this opportunity. I really wish to congratulate the Indica organizers for creating an environment of continuous learning, which is something which I am quite addicted to. Now, my topic, as you all know, is about Dharma as virtue jurisprudence. It is in continuity to the way Pota Raju Garu has begun with. So I would say that most of you will not think it's a surprise if I tell you all that as a student of philosophy, my introduction to virtue ethics was from Greek philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and surprisingly, not from Vedavyasa. Now, questions like what is good, what is justice, what's the right thing to do, were generally discussed with reference to Aristotle's virtue ethics, arete, and practical wisdom promises. Although I was quite familiar with all the concepts of Satyam, Daya, Danam, Tapas, and so on from the stories of Kavyas and Puranas, somehow we did not see much scope to theorize legally or develop a legal theory focused on these virtues. However, it's only much later one tend to grasp the foundational principles that cemented Indian society. Dharma, the substantive principle of ancient law, bound by these seamless web of virtues, I realized was central in sustaining and governing the society, which seemed so obvious later. Now, we all hear about the definition, Dharati Lokaniti Dharma, one of the definitions of Dharma, that it bears the world. But how did it really bear the world? It sustained the world with norms and values of good conduct and righteousness, which are actually indispensable for a good social being or social well-being, for our social well-being. So in this context, I would say that the conversation between Bhishma and Yudhishthira in Shanti Parva was quite instructive, because Yudhishthira asked Bhishma whether the historical conditions create the character of the government or the character of the government creates historical conditions. Bhishma responds in this characteristic way by saying that it is human beings who create the time and the conditions and not the other way around. The best of times and the worst of times is made by human beings. Time is not the force that governs human affairs. Although we tend to say these are not good times, and that's a general blame game that we play. But it is the human mind that decides the quality of human relationship and the quality of the society. This discussion, in a way, I feel, reveals the basis of political and legal philosophy of Dharma jurisprudence. That the individual, the human being himself, is central to the kind of environment he creates. It is the people who build societies, and a harmonious society is based on human relationships. Dharma is in karmacharana, performing the required action. So it also says, dakshe vasan nalase. Success is in action, and action alone promotes dharma. And dharma doesn't encourage indolence. Dharma sthapana can only happen through action and not indolence or slothful mindset. Clearly, one can see that virtuous conduct is considered as the end of law, as against, say, the contemporary view that the purpose of law is to protect the rights of the individuals. Now, if you go back to Greek time and see how Plato also considered these virtues as intrinsic. The four cardinal principles of virtue in his famous book, Republic: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. But he also mentioned that the ruler should be a philosopher, interestingly. Now, the philosopher must be someone who loves truth and must be high-minded and disciplined. And Aristotle follows his guru and taking that virtues are central to a well-lived life. And he goes a step further, saying that character such as courage, temperance is a habit, and that can be cultivated, emphasizing the need to train passions in order to lead a good life. In fact, one tends to think perhaps he must have overheard about the Indian Sadacharas, but I feel when he's talking about character as a habit. If we go to Valmiki Ramayana, where Valmiki says the definition of a ruler is actually axiomatic. Ajitatma narapati vijayete katham ripu. How can a king who has not been able to conquer himself be able to conquer his enemies? A king should first conquer himself to subdue his enemies. The possibility of conquering one's enemies, obviously, is remote for a person who cannot conquer his own weaknesses. The underlying implication being the necessity of cultivating a strong, virtuous character in order to be a just and able ruler. Both Manu and Vyasa argue that inculcation of virtues is the end of law. In fact, the internalization of the virtues brings greater harmony both externally and internally. We know the famous statement, Acharo Prabhava Dharma, good conduct alone promotes Dharma. By making this ethical turn in legal theory, virtue jurisprudence focuses on the importance of character and human excellence. Aristotle's furnaces practical wisdom as he conceives it cannot be acquired solely by learning general rules. They can be acquired through practice. Since virtues are those habits which can be cultivated, the possibility of valuing the laws can come naturally. Now, even Aristotle argued that virtue was the proper end of law. Now Aristotle's virtue jurisprudence has now caught on in the Western world again. Now the contemporary author Robert George, in his book Making Men Mortal, too argues for promotion of virtue, which seems to be going back into the classical times, where he says promotion of virtue as the end of law. And he's also against the view that the purpose of law is not really the protection of rights. John Rawls also, we know in his famous work, A Theory of Justice, alludes to the possibility how Indians might be brought up, so individuals might be brought up in a just state to develop the virtues expected of a good citizen. Now, I give you this background to say how it's now that they have realized the significance of virtue for a just state, but as a student, I was never really academically introduced to Vedavyasa's virtues, which was so intrinsically embedded in a just rule. So we can say that this discussion leads to reiterate the significance attribute to virtues, a right disposition for any effective running of the society. Now, nowhere in the history of jurisprudence have virtues been incorporated into rule of law as elaborately and exhaustively as in Dharma jurisprudence. So when Manu, while elaborating on the necessity of practice of Dharma, expresses the imperative quality of Dharma too as a significant requirement of rule of law. Now he declares Dasikam Dharma Lakshanam, that there are 10 virtues of Dharma. I would like to share, to give you a list of those virtues. Yeah. See, these are Dasikam Dharma Lakshanam. Here is the list: Daya, forbearance, Anusaya, non-jealousy, Saucham, Anayasa, etc. There are about 10 virtues that he. Yeah. What is the purpose of governance is a conversation between Shatavan and Dhumasena, a king, when Shatavan sees a whole lot of people being taken away to be punished. He says, the purpose of governance is to create conditions in which people can be good, but not a law merely as a punishment to kill the wicked. So the emphasis thus is on cultivating an environment where there is human flourishing through individual deliberations, nurturing lawful citizens. So there is a reciprocal relation that exists between the law and its law-abiding people. And therefore, it is by recognizing the authority and soundness of law that people will comply with law. In other words, Manu says, and he enables, ensures the protection of the weak when its strength and power are recognized. The strength of Dharma is recognized. It's only then the weak could be protected. Similarly, Gautama has 8 dharmas in his Dharma Shastra. Oh. There it is. Yes. So you see, these are the dharmas that have been listed, while Veda Vyasa has 30 dharmas that he thinks are essential, which I have listed out here. Smaranam Mahatya, remembering and following the great men, serving Seva, Archanam, Viniti, and the list of virtues, in fact, is quite overwhelming. So what we would do is, for our purpose, we'll just take 3 virtues and elaborate on the concept of Dharma and how it's how its role it plays in Dharma jurisprudence, rather virtue jurisprudence. Now, I would say to begin with Satyam, Daya, Danam, Achara. These are some of the virtues which are most significantly visible to us. So I begin with Satya. With Satyam, we see that there's an important dimension of truth which is relevant to legal virtues. This is best advanced by considering how the judiciary, the lawyers in their role as officers of court, when a judge adjudicates matters in a court of law, it's clear that he is in pursuit of unearthing the truth in order to arrive at an appropriate and a fair decision. The judge must be unbiased in his approach, exercise self-control, be fearless but compassionate while delivering his verdict, unafraid of the consequences while maintaining his inner coherence. Similarly, a witness summoned in a court of law for cross-examination has a responsibility to depose truthfully to the court upon taking an oath, and it invokes further virtues to be practiced such as being honest, fearless, and unbiased. Now, Dharma as a legal principle emphasizes on the value of truth and self-control as innate and essential virtue in legal practice embedded in Satya. Satyakara Trayodashaha, truth takes 13 forms. For instance, Samata, Dhamma, Amatsyam, Kshama, Ri, Titiksha, Anasuyata, Tyaga, Dhyanam, Aryatvam, Dhriti, Daya, and Ahimsa. So you see the different, how complex and detailed is the concept of truth, the way Veda Vyasa has put forward here. Practicing truthfulness develops other important human qualities. They are impartiality, self-control, renunciation, nobility, and also daya. According to Hindu Shastras, the judge to be appointed was called Pragvika, and it was directed that he must be possessed of self-control. And he belongs to a respectable family, be impartial, intemperate, firm, fearful of future, virtuous, attentive, and free from passion. As regards their qualities, it was declared that they should be learned in Vedas, acquired with the sacred law, addicted to truth, and this is really significant, addicted to truth, and impartial towards friends and foes. One cannot miss the emphasis on virtues here. Further, Kautilya in his Arthashastra describes the duties of a judge and the qualities required to be a judge. Judges shall be learned in Dharma and have the qualifications of a minister. They shall discharge their duties objectively and impartially so that they can earn the trust and affection of the people. So you see, truthfulness is not a kind of a possession, but it is a dispositional quality of mind that constitutes the best traits of a human being. Nothing can be more sustaining in any society than having people practicing truth. Where the administration is least trained is when the transactions that are made are honest and transparent, a manufacturer who produces high quality goods, an individual who diligently pays his taxes, have all the power as individuals to create an open and a transparent, cohesive society. We can see how truth is a functional, practical virtue, in fact, what we can call a co-extension of social duty. Now, in Shanti Parva, Bhishma elaborates on the virtues of practicing truthfulness. He says, Sat Kalyana Hitam Satyam. What is good to society is truth. Satyam Sarvahitam Proktam Yatartha Khadanam Nahi. Truth is beneficial to all. It's not as if it's helpful to some and not helpful to others. Truth is much more than mere correspondence with facts. In fact, the question that is raised is, truth is essential, so the opposite inquiry is, whose truth are you talking about? So the minute he says whose truth, the debate has already begun about what is truth. So that's the reason why we see here Bhishma makes a very detailed elaboration about nature of truth. It says it's not merely correspondence with facts. So we understand the complexity of what truth is. When we say Satyam Vada, it is not a non-reflective response, but is rather a consciously determined and willed conduct of an individual. One does not innocently regurgitate to repeat the facts, but weigh the issues, deliberate, be aware of the consequences, both in its unpleasant and pleasant outcomes. But what is the final purpose of truth? It says it's best to speak the truth and speak the truth for the good. I call only that truth that serves universal good. This forms the foundation of good governance, practicing impartiality and creating trust among people. So when it says Satyam Sarvahitam Proktam Yathartha Kadanam Nasti, truth brings well-being and flourishing for all. It's not a mere factual and precise account of events. So this is in a way showing you how truth, Satyam, is a functional principle. It's a working principle for all societies, and one cannot dispense with it at any point of time. Now, the next virtue that I would like to talk about is Daya, where in Anushasana Parva, there is a very beautiful illustration given by Bhishma, because Daya or compassion is a principle that is best communicated through an illustration. When you communicate, saying you have to be kind and compassionate, share, it is not as effective as giving it through a illustration. So here he talks in the Anushasana Parva, he says, Anukrosho hi sadhu nam mahadharmasya lakshana. Anukrososya sadhunam sada pritim prayachati. So this, I would like to share this upakhyana from Anushasana Parva, which is the Dana Dharma Parva, where when Yudhishthira requests Bhishma to explain what are the merits of daya, and compassion, and how do people behave when they have, how do you identify those who show compassion, he narrates in this Upakhyana, the story of Vasava and the high-minded Shuka. It happens that a fowler in the territories of King of Kashi left his village on a hunting excursion in search of antelopes, and looking for a prey, he discovered a drove of antelopes, and he shot his arrow at one of them. And it so happened that the fowler missed his target that day, and he pierced the mighty forest tree instead. Now, as a result, the tree weathered away, although it weathered many a storm in the past, it bent over and fell to waste and started to wither away. Now, there was a parrot that was living in the hollow of its trunk all its life, and it did not leave his nest out of affection for this magnificent tree which had sheltered him at all points of his life. And so the tree was wasted away, and the bird too was motionless and without food for a long time, because the parrot was grateful for having been given shelter by the tree. So a very strange thing happened then. As the poor bird was breathing its last, Indra, watching these events, was surprised, and he wondered, how could this mere bird come to possess such humane and fine feelings? He thought it's only human beings who have this kind of emotions. There must be something, perhaps something wonderful in this matter. So, out of curiosity, he goes down in the guise of a Brahmana, and he descends on earth and asks the bird, what reasons do you not leave this withered, barren tree? Why do you cling to it? There are numerous fine fruit-bearing leafy trees you could nestle in, or patient exercise due. Why don't you exercise due discrimination and forsake this old tree? It's all but dead, and it's no longer any good. So the virtuous parent, hearing these words of Indra, heaves a deep sigh and sorrowfully says, "Oh, a wise Brahmin, here within this tree I was born, and here in this tree I've acquired all the good traits of my character. And here in this tree was I protected in my infancy from assaults of my enemies. Kindliness of feeling is the great test of virtue amongst the good. And the same compassionate human feeling is the source of perennial felicity to the virtuous. Why do you advise me now to abandon this tree forever? When it was capable of goodness, it supported my life. How can I forsake it now?" Now, Indra was truly amazed with this answer. "I'm gratified with your humane and compassionate disposition. I shall grant you a boon. Tell me what you wish for." And the bird was quick to seize the opportunity. "Let this tree be revived, O Lord." So Indra was well pleased with this answer and sprinkled sweet nectar on the tree to revive it to its former glory. So while narrating this Upakhyana, Bhishma tells Yudhishthira that the bird obtained the companionship, that the communion and companionship with the pious people attain all objects of this desire, even as the tree did through its companionship with the parrot. That it reminds me of situations where parents do petition in the court of law for maintenance from their children. Now, illustrations like this should say why developed societies we have so much of alienation. There are homeless people, there is inequality. Now, the virtues of compassion are principles, are legal principles, but they couldn't possibly be taught in a court of in law schools, but they can only be caught. So when we listen to such Vakhyanas, it's clear that the virtue that we are talking about, or the virtue jurisprudence as a legal principle, enables us to develop a secure, safe society. And it is through these virtues that one can continue to maintain that kind of a society. Am I, Nagaraj Garu, am I running out of time? Or?
No. You may. I think you're already approaching your conclusion, and yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I have one more virtue to talk about, and then illustrate it, and that is on Dhamma. It is important. Dhamma is self-control. Now, it is very important for me to take up this virtue because most of our rights, as we see, the majority of rights are negative rights. And I would like to connect it with self-control, Dhamma. The very popular statement of Maryadayam Sitam Dharmaha Samaschevascha Lakshanam. Keeping oneself within bounds is Dharma. Self-control is its essence. Now, Bhishma deliberates on self-control and says that all the legal rules self-control is a primary and a significant legal principles. Now, how does self-control come in a place of legal principle? It is a kind of forbearance. Respecting others' liberties for forbearance is essential in our everyday life. Keeping oneself within bounds can be understood as exercising one's weak rights within the limits of law and not transgressing one's privilege or liberty. This is actually an essential aspect of Dharma as Dhamma. Dhamma or self-control can also be called as Indriya Nigraha. The singular reason being that self-control cultivates a strong will that will lead to success. In short, a self-controlled person will have the capacity to resist doing illegal acts. So I would say that the virtues of self-control is such that it develops characteristics such as forgiveness, anger control, patience, impartiality, truth, modesty, firmness, liberality, benevolence, all qualities that make for a great leader. In any society, large sections of people must exercise self control in order to ensure that the law and order prevail. There is an implicit acceptance of each other's boundaries. A society functions peacefully by exercising self control in their dealings with others' property. And therefore, I would like to conclude my talk today by stating that the virtues such as Satyam, Daya, Danam, Damam, and Acharas, the good conduct, unravel its legal consequences. Truth as a legal principle is well described in adversarial systems of dispute resolution. Similarly, the virtue such as truth is not to be confused with moral injunctions, but as the fundamental grounds to maintain the standards and integrity of social and legal institutions. What we call as Jagat Kalyan, freedom or a right must always be understood in relation to others. Tamam or self-control as a negative right illustrates the virtue of understanding liberty, a right for which there is no corresponding duty. Therefore, rights such as liberty must be understood as exercising rights with self-control. Therefore, I said the emphasis on virtues is an indication of the direction and the intent towards which the concept of Dharma, the norm-centric legal principle, has evolved. Thank you very much for giving me this chance. Namaskaram to all of you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Srilakshmi Peddada garu. It was a very really seminal paper talk, because now all over the world, virtue jurisprudence and virtue ethics have come into discussion once again. And the colonization of various fields of both skill and knowledge in India have led to the separation of the character of the practitioner and his practice.
Right.
It happened in the fields of art and poetry also. People started talking about, okay, let us leave the personal character of the artist, let us look at the art.
Yes.
They started saying, okay, let us leave the personal character of the poet, let us just enjoy his poetry and support him. And then we went on to the area where we started questioning the personal character of the political leaders. Media started highlighting it, and personal character of the judges came into question.
Yes.
Personal character of the advocates started coming into the question. Bar council started taking cognizance of the personal life and personal character of the advocates. Now the whole legal field, whole judicial practice has come to realize that they cannot just push it under the carpet.
Right. Yes.
And I think it is timely that you have come up with this topic of virtue jurisprudence, and I hope that the judicial field is going to come closer and closer to catching up with this worldwide demand for virtue legal practice or virtue jurisprudence. Thank you very much, ma'am.